Welcome to the Optimized Equine Podcast. Today I am joined by show jumper Vani Khosla. Vani competes internationally at the top of her sport. In 2024, she was selected to compete for Team USA jumping in Spain. Recently, we had the chance to catch up at Desert Circuit in Thermal, California. Vani was there competing with several of her horses and her coach, Olympian Matthias Van Asten. In fact, we tried to record a podcast there and had some technical challenges. So, Vani, thank you so much for joining me once again today. I sure appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Now, you began riding in the Grand Prix classes in 2016 on a stallion named Billy Mexico. And in fact, that same year was when you won your first Grand Prix. Can you fill us in on a bit of your background with horses?
Yeah, so I come from a non-horse family, actually. And my parents bought a tree farm in Northern California, and there were some horses on the property. So they said to us, if you're going to ride them, then you have to take lessons first, which I think they regret to this day. So I actually started in barrel racing. I had a really cool Western horse, and I started taking lessons barrel racing. And then my sister, she did, her friend did like hunter jumpers. And I went one day after school to carpool and watch her ride. And I watched her do one lesson and I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. So I took my barrel racing horse and I started show jumping. It was exciting for him. He was a good trooper. But yeah, so I've been at a couple different barns since then. I started at Millennium Farm, really great place for me to start. And then I moved to Lise Quintero and Todd Gregory. And they took me to Spruce Meadows. So I really got to see like top jumpers. And I knew that's where I wanted to go in the end. And then I rode for a long time with Meadowgrove Farm with Dick and Francie Steinwell Carvin and Susie Schroer and Zazu Hoffman. And they were the ones that got me Billy Mexico and got me kind of in those bigger classes for the first time. And yeah, since it sort of all took off from there.
So fill us in on from 2016 to now, almost a decade. Tell us a little bit about how you've progressed. Obviously, a lot has happened, and you've had several horses since then.
Yeah, so we were very lucky to go to Spruce Meadows every summer, so we got to like see some top jumping every year, and so we'd go up there, and the goal would be to jump the FEI classes, jump in the international ring, everything. And then actually Zazu, who is one of my good friends and was also a trainer at the time, she got to be on a 3-star Nations Cup team. And so it kind of helped me like figure out that that's the path I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to go for top sport. Like I wanted to see how far I could get in the sport, but I wasn't always sure what direction was the right way to get there. But that really helped kind of give me something to aim for that was a little bit more immediate than just top sport.
Right. Hopefully this doesn't take us too off course here, but can you tell us a little bit about how that all works, those classes? That's something we didn't get to chat about last time, but for someone who's not familiar, what does that path look like and what is the goal?
Yeah, for me, the path really was, you come up through the junior and amateur levels. I feel that the high amateur, high junior 140 with the 145 classics are really, really good mileage to kind of like get into the bigger jumping. And then really for me, I jumped a lot of national Grand Prix, a lot of the Thursday, Friday national Grand Prix to set up for the Sunday and Saturday. Those classes are really, really good for getting mileage and experience. But then you got to put yourself out there. You got to get to FEI shows. Europe has a little bit more advantage than us because they have 1-stars. So you can start to jump a 1-star Grand Prix. We have to start in the 2-star level. So a 2-star Grand Prix is still a big enough class. And yeah, just to try to get as many of those as I could. At Spruce, they only have the 5-star level at the time that I was jumping there, but they really had the U25 division. And they also have the 145 division in all the FEI. So really you have to kind of go through the steps and make sure you're not staying too small in the shows you're going to, and try to expose yourself to different things and different levels and different competition, see different people in the ring and take your steps that way.
Gotcha. Okay. So thank you for telling us a little bit about some of that. How, when you were selected to jump for Team USA at the end of 2024, what is that process like?
Yeah, the process was an interesting one. That was not my first time applying, but I think it's really important. A lot of people apply to kind of get to know the system and get to know all the different players and stuff before you actually get selected for a team. It's a good experience, and really to start talking to different people along the pathway is important. I what I learned really is like kind of you have to advocate for yourself a bit. You have to reach out, send your videos, make sure people have eyes on you. Anne was really great to talk to. I texted her all the time. I sent her my videos. I talked to some other people kind of up, but just kind of keeping communication lines open and then really focusing on your results, not in the sense that you should be jumping all year to try to make the team. But I really tried to focus on, like, regardless of what happens with the team or not, you want really consistent results at a top level. And then things come,
Right. Okay, so back to your story. At some point, I know you relocated to the Netherlands. So fill us in on that jump and how you came to decide to do that.
Yeah, so pre-COVID, I had really gotten to the point where I wanted to get to Europe. I wanted to show in Europe. I wanted to go and get the experience. And then COVID hit. So plans all changed and everything. And then shortly after, I actually decided to go east. So I was in Wellington for a season with the Prudence, and they were amazing to learn from. But Zazu had actually gone to Europe, and she had ended up with Matthias and Christine. And I had sent Billy with her because he was 17 at the time, and she knew him really well. So she kept him going a bit for me. So I was very fortunate I got to go over and show him in a couple shows. And once I was there, I thought, this is where I want to be. And I want my horses here and I want to be at these shows. And so luckily Matthias and Christine were very receptive to me coming. And that was in June of 2022. And I've been there ever since.
And so what was it that, some people who listen to this are just not even remotely in the hunter jumper world. So what is it about the European horsing life that you liked so much when you went over for those shows?
It's really interesting. The culture in Europe and the culture in the US is very different. And I think when you get a background in both, it complements each other very well. The US system is very focused on the junior careers, bringing people up through the system. And they're very focused on the rider, which I think is a really important thing, like developing riders in the right way, teaching them the good basic skills. Those are really important things. But when you get to Europe, they spend most of their time talking about the horses. So they're really interested in developing the horses to the horse's top level, not the rider, So they're really, all the conversations are really around more about the development of the horse versus the rider. And I find in general, the culture is a bit more of a professional culture. So it was a nice change for me to be at a show where, you don't have amateur classes and things that a lot of or national classes. Those are separate shows.
I was going to ask kind of what you meant by a professional culture.
Yeah, so it's mostly like when you go to these FEI shows, those are the feature event, and those are actually the only things that are happening. Occasionally, there's like a cool pony class or something going along too, but they really like separate their shows a bit more than we do here.
Okay.
So you're really
so meaning, would you say that then to get the lower level classes, obviously they must exist, but it's not at the same show as the big stuff. It's just a totally separate deal. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, often they still have a 1-star running alongside a big show, so you still get some smaller classes, but people that are riding in a 1-star are also experienced. They're coming to the show ready to compete at their level. So you have a lot more like people go to the show to compete and are ready, and then otherwise they go to training shows and national shows, and it's just a bit more separated in that.
Gotcha. Okay. So since relocating and really immersing yourself in that kind of thing and riding with your coach, would you say there are any really noticeable things that have changed about your riding?
Yeah, I mean, for sure my riding has gotten better.
Obviously, it would be getting better as you practice over time. But is there anything that you're like, oh yes, this was a principle that like changed a lot of different things or something
Yeah,
like that?
I felt a lot in the US that my riding was so focused on my plan. So like there was a certain number of strides I had to do and this and that, like everywhere. I would say it's a little looser in that. It's a lot more feeling how the horse is jumping and what I need to do to create a good jump. So
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of an interesting shift for me that I was like, oh, I'm allowed to add a stride if I feel like my horse is going to jump a better jump because I do that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
So
like
like
I was,
the feel versus the mechanics,
yeah, I was so
both are
focused.
important.
Yeah,
But you're saying you felt it a little more mechanical in your riding in the US and you kind of
yeah.
balanced out the feel side of things since transitioning over there.
I mean, in the US, I was really, really focused on executing a specific plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I was lacking a little bit of the feel part. And those
Right.
things work really well when you have them together, but you need
Mm-hmm.
both parts of it.
Yeah, most definitely. Are there any things that you're specifically working to improve right now with, you could tell us with an individual horse or if there's kind of like an overarching theme, like with all of my horses, this is a thing that I know I'm working on right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, always things to get better in the ring about. I'm still working on my consistency at the top level. I feel pretty comfortable, but there's still days that are not quite all coming together. And there's definitely still skills I'm getting. Each horse you add to the string, you bring a new skill or new something to learn. And I have two horses that I'm still developing my relationship with right now. Like Cream is my main horse, and I've been jumping him in Grand Prix for a while. But the other two I'm still working on developing that relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
that's an ongoing thing always. Cream and I we have a great relationship, but we're always still working together on that.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you had him?
Cream I bought in August of 2023.
Okay, so a little while now. And then you said you have two more at that level that are newer, right? And then are you also bringing some horses up through the levels?
Yeah, I have a few years ago I bought a couple 7-year-olds. So one of them I'm still riding and he's 10 now, but he's still sort of in the developing phase. So kind of let him go at his pace. It doesn't really matter
Mm-hmm.
how old he is now, but and we're always on a little bit of the lookout for what else is, it's you want to have horses a little bit in the pipeline because it's hard to find them at the top. So
Mm-hmm. And
have,
expensive.
yeah, it's expensive, but
Yes.
it's also a way cooler feeling when you've developed a relationship with the horse, regardless of when you get them. You feel
Mm-hmm.
like better when you have a relationship with them than when you're just
Right. Um, brings me to another question that to me the relationship side of things is a huge deal, and it brings out a lot of like personal development, definitely out of the saddle as well. So are there any lessons that horses have helped you learn out of the saddle?
a lot. I'd say the biggest thing for me is learning to be patient. That's a hard one for me. And
Uh-huh.
also I can be a pretty like aggressive planner. Like I really like to have everything. And I've kind of learned that sometimes we have to go with the flow. The horses will tell you, they'll change their mind, they'll do things. So that's been an important lesson for me. I'm still working on it, but constantly thinking about that and how to keep everything flexible and having a plan, but being flexible in it.
Yeah. And I think, for me, having different horses opens up so many different opportunities. It's like sometimes when I look back, I'm like, man, I keep learning the same lesson over and over. It's just like it's been presented different ways by different horses, and then when you realize that, you can finally get to the other side of that thing,
Yeah, I
So,
mean, they have their own personalities and things, quirks too. So some
yeah.
horses teach you some things in a nicer way, others teach you, but they all are trying to teach you something also.
Yeah. Now, can you talk a little bit about how you prepare for a big show series like the Desert Circuit? That was a 10-week series. Now, I know you didn't show all 10 weeks, but obviously you brought horses over from the Netherlands, so you did a lot of showing and things like that. How do you prepare for a series like that? And then what does their day-to-day or their week look like when you're actually in it?
Yeah, so, before circuit begins, Matthias and I sat down and sort of made a plan roughly for each horse. It's quite different. Like Orlando was a very new horse, so it wasn't that I was targeting a specific class, but I was targeting to have a specific experience with him over the circuit, which was mostly getting to know him and getting some mileage for the rest of the year. A horse like Cream, we really target. Like, we're like, this is the most important Grand Prix we want to jump. These are the classes we need to jump to get to that based on what he needs, what I need, and where we both are from the day we start planning.
Mm-hmm.
So these things are all like pretty thought out. Plans change again as you go along. Horses have their good days, bad days. We have ours, and we have days that are good to push. But I treat it like much like I treat my own workouts in the gym. I have some days that are and weeks that are planned for harder building, stretching, learning, growing. And then I have other weeks where I'm like, this is kind of a mobility week. This is a week to keep things quiet, let the body recover. This is the moment to push. This is the moment not. So the horses have a very similar plan. And especially, their age tells you a lot too. If you have an older horse, you want to save them a bit. A younger horse normally can keep going a little bit, but often at the end of a long circuit, their brains get tired. So you're kind of shuffling a few things. In general, we believe in trying to target a bit of a week or two. I think it's a little unrealistic to expect a horse to jump the whole circuit in the same way. So we really work towards that and maybe spreading the horses a bit out. Like when I know I'm going to be there for that many weeks, then maybe I want to try to peak one horse one week and then the different horse the next week. So it keeps my progression going a bit without taking too much out of the horses.
That makes sense. And, you talk a lot about adjusting to what your horses need. How do you know what your horses need? What are some ways that your horses tell you, quote unquote, of course, what they need? Obviously, that comes down to feel if we want to just look at like a big picture thing. But you have several horses, so I'm sure you've had that experience of like they kind of tell you in different ways and you learn to read different things about them. Can you tell us about some of those sort of specifics?
Yeah, I mean, that's where having such a basis of relationship is so important with the horses because they don't tell you in the same way. So Cream, who was my one that I brought along that I had the longest, like I know him really well. So I know when he's strong, when he doesn't want to go forward, what all those things mean to him. Like this is bothering him, this isn't, he feels good today. So like there's very small cues that you get from just knowing the horses. We have some horses that perform better when they're fresh, and we have some horses that perform better when they're a bit quiet. So like they'll tell you a little bit where their head's at and where they are at the beginning of the week. And it's going to change by the end of the week, but also know when you've had enough time with them, like, oh, this horse always jumps his best day on the third day of jumping, or this one jumps the best on the first day. So, there's a little bit of I'd say more history in knowing the horses than it actually is in the something that they're doing. It's not, okay, if a horse is limping, it's probably lame, but
right.
A lot less obvious cues than that, I would say, normally for when they're feeling day to day.
Yeah. Okay. And tell us a little bit about what their week or what your plan might look like if you're at a stretch at home and how that differs. Like how many days a week is a normal like riding on the flat versus jumping? How do you approach that kind of thing?
Yeah. So like my horses now just came home from the show and actually they're pretty quiet. They're mostly spending time in the field and they had a big circuit and then a big travel back. So they're for a few days quite quiet. On a normal week at home, they get worked 6 days a week. We kind of alternate that between riding and lunging. And lunging sort of sounds funny. Our horses are never lunged to become quiet. They're lunged to work their bodies. So it's a bit of a different type of lunging. But we try to change up the work a little bit when you're at home. Like we have a track. So maybe they'll go one day to the track. Maybe one day they'll do flat work in the ring. Sometimes I trot down the road. Like just trying to like keep their minds a bit busy so they don't get too bored. But you don't want to overwork the body often. We don't tend to jump for no reason. So, we pick the next show and we work backwards and we say, how many times does this horse need to jump before that show? What do they need for their fitness? It's different for different horses. I've had horses that need to jump 2 days a week, every week, no matter what. And I've had horses that are like, it's better for them to go 2 weeks no jumping and then build again. So it's a little hard to say exactly, but we tend not to over jump our horses at home. And then we train a bit more right before a show.
Gotcha. Okay. And do you feel that you need the jumping more at home than they do, or
for sure?
How do you? Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Gotcha. For sure, it's me that needs it more than them.
Uh-huh.
I mean, more as a rider that you jump and get in the ring and practice and whatever. It just makes a big difference for your eye and your. I mean, I'm a rider that relies a lot on rhythm, so like having rhythm going into a show makes a big difference for me. Because of that. And knowing that, I have like a couple older horses. My old Grand Prix horse still jumps at home. Like I keep some ones that can help carry that load so that the show horses aren't always having to do everything.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I certainly have never competed at that level jumping. I know from the experience I have jumping in the much smaller fences, I feel like a lot of the human stuff can be worked on with poles. I mean, honestly, so much of that human stuff and that feel and communication with your horse. Clearly, we can't just show up and do it the first time at the horse show doing a course. You have to find the balance there. I don't think at your level, but I think at some levels, there are a lot of people that just like jump and jump and jump and jump and jump. And that's we got to practice. It's like, they only got so many jumps in there.
Yeah.
So,
it's a tricky thing. It comes down to developing a rider and developing a horse. Sometimes they're not perfectly aligned. I think in general, people want to do right by their horses and be, but it's a hard thing when you have one horse and you only get to jump a few times a month. It's very hard to develop yourself. So at the lower levels, I do think the horses have to actually jump more than the horses at the top level because they also are in a lot of ways using their body less or, Yeah,
it is definitely a different ask on their body at that lower level too.
With the horses that jump at the top level are high performance athletes. So everything we're doing is to, have them ready for that competition moment. I think it's important to remember sometimes at the lower levels that that's not always the end goal because it is also about learning and teaching. And maybe the horses have to look a little bit different for those jobs than they do for high performance. I would kind of say like it's very hard because we have horses and animals involved. But if you look at a lot of top sports, at the top levels, a lot of those performance athletes it's not that they're out there every day doing the exact same thing. But maybe at the lower levels when you start, you are because you need practice and hours and times and seeing different jumps. I agree. You can do a lot with pole work. You can do a lot on flat work to get to know your horse and to, a lot of people think about jumping all the time, but it's really having the flat work and everything correct so that everything works in between the jumps because the jumps are sometimes once you're there, that's all
a jump with a good distance isn't that hard, right? That's the thing. If you can get there, then
I mean, a lot of creating a good distance is about having correct flat work and correct, responsiveness from your horse. It's not about seeing the jump and seeing where to leave from. It's really the other parts that make it work. And I think, it just takes time to learn that and practice. And I think it's a bit tricky to compare the horses at the low level to the top level and the amounts they jump because of that. It's just a very different job, really.
Yeah, most definitely. And we also, I guess, to compare it this way, we wouldn't expect a Pee-wee level like flag football player to have the same schedule that an NFL player is going to have. So it is definitely a different thing for sure.
I think it's important to be aware of it, like even at the low levels to ask yourself, am I over jumping? Am I not jumping? Like you should just question these things because that's how we all as a whole get better at everything.
Now, talking about jumping, what do you have planned for the rest of this year as far as the shows? How's that looking?
Yeah, our shows are a little bit up in the air right now.
Okay.
As it goes, I say we do a lot of planning and we gear horses towards things, but also at the top level, you often don't know what shows you're into until much closer to the show. So
Gotcha. Okay.
you have your eye on a few things, but you have to be a bit flexible because things change. April is quite a quiet month for us because once the summer starts, May, June, July, August, and in Europe is busy. There's a lot
Okay.
of amazing shows, and we'll try to peak horses for different weeks, but the horses will have to be ready to go. So I like to have them feeling their best starting the summer. So they'll have right now it's just about getting everybody back into their best shape.
Mm-hmm.
Again, different for different horses, but yeah, we'll start. I know immediately what comes up for me are some really nice 3 stars in Holland, one in Kessel and one in Eindhoven, and both amazing shows. So those are my first sites that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we'll see a bit. Kind of still planning over the next month what the summer is going to look like.
Okay. And then if we go out a little farther from that, as far as short-term goals over maybe like the next 3 to 5 years, are there anything different in that 3 to 5 year window versus the rest of this year?
Yeah, my next things that I'm really going to focus on, I have some small details that are going to make a big difference in my riding. So continuing to identify those and work on those. I think also, I want to get myself on some more teams eventually. I'm not sure exactly when I'll go for that, but more experience, more time in that atmosphere. It's a totally different atmosphere than a normal show. So to get some experience and keep going. Keep going,
Mm-hmm.
reach for the top. Don't slow down just because we have to change plans or anything like that, but keep going a bit for the top.
Gotcha. Now, as far as, well, let's go one more time out. We're going to zoom out once more. What about 10 years? Anything different? Same answer? It's okay if it's the same answer, but just curious.
In some ways I'm a big planner. Like I know what I want to do and this, but in other ways I'm like hesitant to put too many words into what the next 10 years look like.
Yeah.
For sure I'm going to be in Europe for a while. I have a great situation. I love learning from Matthias, Christine also, and I've learned a lot. I definitely can see myself a bit being back and forth, like doing the winter in California maybe, or maybe Florida or somewhere else, just
Mm-hmm.
trying to still be home sometimes. But
Yeah.
for now, I see myself really, I'd say like the next few years and things really going for sport and being here and trying to develop my skills both as an athlete and a horsewoman and seeing kind of where that goes. And maybe I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years, but I
Yeah.
hope still here.
Perfect. Love it. Love it. Now, as far as the industry, I feel like your personal goals and all of that, it's really at the top of the sport. Sometimes I think this question is a little challenging, especially in a sport that kind of comes from tradition, and that would be, how do you see the sport evolving? In some ways, I think it's easy to be like, it doesn't need to evolve. People are just going to keep doing it the best they can. And I think that's a fair answer. I do think there's definitely other people out there that feel like something's got to change. Ugh, ethics, all this stuff. And it's not about whether we agree or disagree, but let's say that those people start to have an effect on competitions. Like if somebody said evolution must happen, do you have any thoughts on how or what direction or where that may go?
Yeah, it's a hard question. Um, I think in general, our sport is developing in the right way. You see more and more top sport coming to the US. I'd say, the major leagues came. We have a lot more 5 stars. We have a circuit in Traverse City that was really built up over the last few years. These things are all good for our sport. These shows also do have, like, Traverse City is a great all-around show. You can go with your equitation, hunters, Lola. So, like, these things are important for developing the sport, because the people coming up through the sport need to see the top level to know where it's going. What part do they want to be part of? Where do they want to go? There's always questions about how are we developing in the right way? Are we developing? There's probably going to be some things that are not correct. There's always a few bad eggs in the bunch. I think in general, the horse show managers, the stewards, the riders, everybody wants the sport to be bigger, to do better, to have more following. And so, kind of important to remember that we all have the same goal. We don't always agree with how we're getting there, but we do all have the same goal, and we all love the horses. And I think when you start with that and you realize, how do we all individually keep ourselves learning to make sure we're going in the right direction? I can't totally answer to where I think it's really going to go in the next few years, but I see a lot of encouraging signs. I mean, the Desert Horse Park has really, really built up a very nice circuit. It's very horse friendly. You know, they want riders and horses to develop there at all levels. I mean, I saw almost every division have a chance out in the Grand Prix ring, and the hunters and the equitation. So everybody's trying to build sport up in a way. I think it'll be good for the sport over the long term. We're going to have some bumps and some conversations, but that's all part of growing.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that equestrian sports in the Olympics should be shaking in their boots right now? Should they be concerned about being able to stay in the Olympics? I would think that would be very sad if that was not in the Olympics. I think that would be so sad. That being said, obviously there has been some press that is not good that came from that. And I think that's where there's all kinds of people that don't know enough about horses prior to those sort of news events. Didn't know enough about horses to look at a horse show and really think one way or the other about it. And then they just get this little bit of like, oh, look, abuse, blue tongues, this or that, whatever the news story you happen to see is. And then it's just like, well, I'm not, I'm anti that. And I think that's just such a shame. So any thoughts on if the Olympics is a thing that's going to carry on? Like I said, I don't have a ton of information on it myself. I just know that I've been exposed to both sides of like the equine welfare thing. Obviously, it's a big deal to me. I think competitions need to be better in some departments in that way. But I've also seen people that don't, from my perspective, don't know a darn thing about reading a horse's behavior, commenting on things that's like, no, I don't think that's what that is. So, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. The sport deserves to be in the Olympics. It's an amazing thing to watch. I think it's an amazing thing all of the horse athletes and human athletes do at that level. We have a welfare component. And when we're on a stage like the Olympics, we have a lot of people watching the sport that know nothing about it. And I think that is just something that we have to be aware of. How do we present ourselves in a way for people that don't understand? Because really, there's a lot of people that have no experience with training animals. They don't even know basic training tools for animals. So then you ask them to watch this high-level sport, and they are going to form opinions. It's just, the way social media and the news works, these things are always out there. So it's just really something we have to be aware of. And I think as a whole community, we just have to be a little bit more, I would just say a little bit more aware of it, and I think people are coming around to that. The thing I would say to people that don't know the sport is that these are top athletes and they are treated as such. So they get the best care. Horses can't perform at a top level like this day in, day out if they're not getting good care. Are there things that between riders you would disagree with doing or not? But yes, but that's also true for human athletes, right? Like People do
Yeah.
different things to get ready for their sport, and I think it's like really important to also recognize, if you look also at the component of everyone being an athlete, I think you have to realize also there's moments of, they're going to have to work harder before an Olympics and at an Olympics. But look at what all these horses are doing after. They're well cared for. They're well everyone, people want to keep their horses performing at the best. And you
Yeah.
can't do that with an unhappy, unsound horse. So that, I think, is like a really important thing to remember.
Yeah.
The welfare thing in general is always going to be part of our sport, and always something for the people that are part of the sport and are interested in it. I constantly just say, educate yourself. If you see something you're not sure of, don't go attack it. First, go try to figure out what's going on. That's how we're going to, if we have a little more compassion and understanding and trying to learn from each other, there will always be some things that you see that you don't agree with and I don't agree with, but you should start by trying to understand where it's coming from instead of attacking and trying to bring the sport down.
Yeah. It doesn't really help horses. You know what I mean? I know personally I came from that angle, I guess, at times of feeling like, oh, I care about horses too much to tolerate this kind of thing, and it does make you angry. I mean, in a way, I guess that's allowed, but nobody grows, at the end of the day, as I have learned to have a different mindset on things, if you can talk to someone, even if you're doing something that I would completely disagree with, when we talk about it, a lot of times we're saying the same thing. Now, the execution matters. And so there's certain people that it's like, well, you can say that and do that, and that's fine. I'm not going to let you ride my horse. But that's fine. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It's just important, I think, to remember that most people in this sport are good people. There's always a few bad. It doesn't matter which industry, what sport, whatever. There's always some people that are crossing a line or going too far. But at the core of our sport are a lot of people that love horses.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that's important to remember.
Yeah. I often will end up bringing up parenting and horses and the relations, and this is going to be the perfect one. We can't cancel horses because it's no different than parenting. People parent differently, and I don't agree with how everybody does it, but nobody cancels that. We're still allowed to do that whole child-making thing, right?
I don't have kids, but I often have an opinion. So, it's the same thing. It's the same thing as watching someone in the ring. I don't actually know what's going on with their horse, but so you just have to be a bit careful also in how we judge and communicate with each other, because we can make the whole sport better if we do all those things in a productive way.
Perhaps, actually, I think you just... you brought that full circle for me. So I always say that horses taught me the stuff I needed in order to actually be a parent. But also parenting is what probably made me open-minded enough to agree with what you just said, really. Like you said, I don't have kids, but I have opinions. Before I had kids, I had so many opinions, and boy, are they different now. Let me tell you, wow. So I think that's probably what makes me more open-minded about all the horse stuff. Like, we can do stuff that I am not going to do, but we probably do have some similar goals, and we have to unite there so that people that nothing about horses aren't the ones calling the shots and some of those things that regulate our access to them, really. I mean, right now, I say our access at a high level, people are going to have horses, I think. But when it comes to riding schools and people to get into a lesson program and all those things, I think that could become harder if people that don't know horses are making too many rules about ethics and this and that, you know? So.
Yeah, but those people are important. That's how we get more generations and more people in the sport. So to find that balance of allowing them to become, I had some wrong opinions too, starting the sport, and I still do. So just allowing people to come into the sport is really important. We want to keep things growing, and there's always generally a better way to, you can improve things no matter what riding school, what system you're in. But we have to somehow also remember that we're trying to keep the sport open for everyone.
Now we will I'll change gears here to corner turners. So corner turners are people, horses, could be a big show, an event, whatever. It could be anything. But are there any standout corner turners that come to mind to you that have been influential in your life or your riding career?
So I definitely want to start out by saying there have been a few people that have been extremely influential, and I'm really appreciative to them. But I'm going to talk about horses.
Okay, perfect.
I've had a few that have like really, really changed the course of my riding. And just like very briefly to go into them, I had one horse named Wag who would always jump for me when no other horse would. I mean, that probably kept me going in the sport in a moment that would have been hard to keep going. I'm eternally grateful for him for that. I had a horse named Dynamo who really was my first horse I jumped. He actually was around the same time as Billy. I had him first, but I did jump first on him in big classes and get out there. And that horse really gave me the opportunity to do that for the first time. Billy speaks for himself. He changed my life. I went to winning classes. What a horse of a lifetime, everything. He's just an amazing animal. And I still adore, I'm here at home. I go see him every day. He's so excited to see me. We adore each other still. And then I would say I had one of my old Grand Prix horse, Incitatus, Teddy, who I still have. He went around the world with me. I mean, I went to many different programs. I took him to shows I probably had no business going to. I did things, and he was just there with me the whole time. And I just am so grateful that he gave me that opportunity to explore the world a bit. That's hard. And to be, doing that, traveling away from family, everything was really amazing. He was my family for all those trips and all those days, and he still is. And then I would say now I have Cream, who's really given me, he's my first Nations Cup horse. I met some big goals with him over time. And these horses there's been so many amazing supporting horses, and they're all really important for my development. But those ones for me, like, really changed my riding and my career and my path a bit.
Love it. Now, last but not least, my favorite question. If your fairy godmother granted you, will give you 3 horse-related wishes. They can be as specific or non-specific or as realistic or non-realistic as you want. What would you wish for?
To be honest, I kind of only have one wish for each horse, and it's more time with them. It goes so fast, it feels like your relationship with them, the time you have. I just want more time with all of them.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that you would agree, more time in a 24-hour period, and I'm guessing you mean in a lifetime, really, is what you're saying. Yeah. Cool.
For sure.
All right.
Both, but yes.
Yes. Both would just mean more horses, so it's fine. All right. Well, I really appreciate your time today. How can people follow along?
I'm on Instagram. Not a huge social media person, but I'm on there and update every once in a while. So.
Okay. Well, at the very least, they can see some beautiful pictures of your beautiful horses. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm glad we got her done here with microphones and everything. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the show. Visit TamaraLeeBarrett.com for more info and links to our socials. Remember to click follow or subscribe, rate the show, and share with a friend. Until next time, happy horsing.